Sometimes, the gaze drifts away not because of blindness, but because of an unwillingness to acknowledge the obvious. Not from naivety, but from a stubborn hope that time, love, and dedication can work miracles. However, there is something that is not conveyed through the pages of books, but is learned only through experience, weariness, and painful attempts to hold on to what cannot be held. It is about a presence that diminishes, a voice that extinguishes, gestures that carry hidden meaning, even if devoid of screaming. There are subtle ways to be absent, imperceptible forms of neglect, disrespect, and inability to see the true worth of another person. It's not about mistakes, because everyone makes them. The problem lies in the lack of desire for growth, in the lack of interest in becoming better. The point is not that someone stumbles, but that they do not care about the consequences of these mistakes for a loved one. It's not about not knowing how to do the right thing, but about not wanting to make the effort to get out of your comfort zone. And this causes pain that surpasses any betrayal. It is indifference veiled in tranquility, selfishness that does not scream, but gradually erases the personality. Realization does not come at the moment of departure, but at the moment of being, when a person is physically present, but does not invest anything in the relationship, when they speak, but the words are meaningless, when they touch, but do not feel. Having learned to distinguish the unspoken, you begin to feel the emptiness that cannot be filled by either presence or desperate attempts. A special sadness arises when you realize that someone does not appreciate your love and does not even try to understand its value. The problem is not in excessive demands, but in the meager return. It's not about being picky, but about being with someone who demands nothing of themselves. There is a fine line between patience and resignation, which is easy to confuse when the heart desperately believes that waiting is tantamount to love. But alas, this is not always the case. And the main question that remains unanswered: how long can you ignore this truth before it destroys everything around? Waiting for someone who has frozen in development, who does not dare to look deep inside themselves, who avoids doubts and is not ready to take risks, is not true love, but only a skillful disguise of abandonment. And the most agonizing of all types of abandonment is the one we inflict on ourselves, stubbornly refusing to admit that they have long since let us go, although they continue to shower us with beautiful words. There is something that is not taught in schools or universities, a certain inner spark that ignites when you try too long to comprehend the mind of someone who does not understand themselves. When you found excuses for their silence, excused their neglect, supported endeavors they didn't even ask for, you knew in your heart that if you let go of the situation, nothing would remain. And this realization hurts, because it's not just about parting with a specific person, but also about saying goodbye to the illusory hope that someday everything will change for the better. However, this someday turns into a prison, artfully disguised as rosy prospects. There are men who are unable to love themselves, and therefore do not know how to give love to others. And your mission in this life is not to raise broken hearts or heal wounds that they stubbornly deny. You are not their personal psychotherapist, not their mother, and not a refuge, especially if they do not show the slightest desire to get out of the storm raging inside them. There comes a moment when the bravest act is not to continue fighting for them, but to begin fighting for your own happiness and well-being. After all, a person who does not value themselves is not able to appreciate what they are given. It is not enough to realize your worth if every day you are near someone who makes you doubt it. It's not that they are a bad person. The problem is that they are not enough. Their gaze does not inspire confidence. Their words do not inspire new achievements. and their actions do not reflect the love you deserve. There are men whose inner emptiness is bottomless, and you will not be able to fill it. You cannot love them more than they allow themselves to be loved. And while you are painfully trying to understand what is missing, they do not even ask themselves what could be changed. This imbalance destroys you, because true love should not cause so much pain. It should not leave more questions than answers, and should not make you feel lonely in someone's presence. The most paradoxical situation arises when the partner does not commit obvious misconduct, but the internal state steadily deteriorates. There are no loud quarrels, insults, or betrayals, but with each meeting with this person, you feel how your life energy fades away. They do not take initiative, do not seek to look into the soul, are not interested in the sincere state, do not notice the protracted silence about the sore. This is emotional detachment, a lack of soul-deep connection, the inability to be both a mirror and a reliable support. Behind the outward composure lies an inner mediocrity, and behind the facade of stability lies passivity. And although it's hard to explain, because everything seems fine on the surface, in reality, that's far from the truth. It's especially painful to realize that deep down, there's still hope for things to get better. A belief that with time, love, and patience, the situation will change. However, as life shows, there are inner voids that cannot be filled from the outside. There are men who are not broken by life, but simply don't strive for more. And no amount of light, self-sacrifice, or willingness to love can force a person to love life if they don't want to. It's impossible to forcibly drag someone into the depths of true love if they prefer to stay on the surface. At this moment comes the realization that this is not a personal responsibility, that there is no need to adapt, diminish one's virtues, or adjust to their emotional limitations. A woman's task is not to become the exception that changes him, or the mentor who teaches him to love. Her purpose is to share her personality, not to sacrifice it, to grow together with her partner, not to raise a man who refuses to develop. Accepting this can be difficult, because from childhood it was instilled that love is all-powerful and can correct any shortcomings if you love hard enough. But the reality is that love requires mutual will, awareness, and effort. Otherwise, it's not about love, but about dependence, fear, or shared loneliness. There comes a moment when the veil of illusions falls away, and you see the world with a new, sober look. In that instant, something breaks inside, like a dry branch that couldn't bear the burden of a long winter. This realization doesn't come suddenly, but is made up of 1,000 little things that once seemed insignificant, but now, gathered together, represent an undeniable truth. You realize that in a relationship where there should have been two, you were alone. The man you painted in your imagination, caring, protecting, supporting in difficult times, never existed in reality. You created his image in your mind, desired him with all your heart, projected onto him the qualities you hoped to acquire, but his true essence turned out to be different. Not because he was devoid of potential, but because he didn't want to reveal it, didn't have the courage to face his fears, his history, his decisions, his inability to emotional intimacy. And you, who felt it from the very beginning, caught the barely perceptible signals from the first evasive gesture, from the first change of subject. When you touched on something intimate, refused to believe it, because you wanted it to work out, because you fell in love not only with him, but also with the possibility that he could become different. You clung to this hope like a drowning person to a straw, believing that it would someday turn into a strong root. But that didn't happen, because he didn't want to grow anything, wasn't going to plant anything with you, even though you had already sown seeds of hope in his silence. And here comes the most bitter realization. His seeming calm was just a way to avoid involvement. His words, "I am like this," were an excuse for not wanting to grow. His constant evasions were not emotional awkwardness, but a conscious choice. After all, to love truly, deeply, means experiencing discomfort, looking deep inside oneself, changing. And he doesn't want that. He's just looking for company, not commitment. He wants you to be there, but doesn't require your authentic presence. He craves your energy, your dedication, your understanding, but gives you nothing in return, nothing that could support you. And so, in the pursuit of mutual understanding, you begin to mute the sound of your own desires, fall silent so as not to cause him embarrassment. You find excuses for his inattention, forgetfulness, laconic answers, convincing yourself of excessive demandingness. But these are not excessive demands, but a fair expectation, something that every self-respecting person deserves. However, when a person with low self-esteem is nearby, any manifestation of deep feelings, sincerity, and a desire for genuine connection is perceived as a threat, as a challenge to his internal problems, which he does not want to work on. And not everyone is ready to see their reflection in the mirror of your sincere eyes. It is at this moment that the realization comes. It's not about your emotionality, depth, and intensity of experiences. The problem lies in his superficial attitude towards you, in his desire to stay in his comfort zone, in predictability, in unwillingness to change and develop. In your case, with your high energy, all-consuming sensitivity, and sincere devotion, you begin to feel like an outsider, as if your love is too much, as if your intensity is an unbearable burden. But that is not the case. It is simply that he does not know what to do with such truth, because he has never built it within himself. And you gradually wear down, not because of loud arguments or pivotal events, but because of a constant trifle, being unnoticed, ignored in what matters most, speaking and not being heard, looking and not seeing depth in return, giving hugs that do not meet with reciprocal warmth, asking questions that remain unanswered, not because of their complexity, but because of a lack of interest in exploring your inner world. He is simply not in love with you. He is comfortable being around you, and that difference causes pain that surpasses any betrayal. It is not only the indifference that hurts, but also the hope placed on barren ground. That part of you that still believes that if you put in more effort, speak more clearly, open up even more, he will finally wake up. But he does not wake up, and you continue to wait. And with each passing day, a part of you dies. After all, loving someone who does not reciprocate is not only agonizing, but also inhumane. It is draining, makes you doubt your own perception, your feelings, your truth. And then comes the moment of an honest conversation with yourself, when the question rings in your head. When did I settle for so little? When did I start calling something love that is devoid of depth and strength? Gradually, you realize that it was not an instantaneous decision. It was an imperceptible process, hidden behind the mask of everyday life, habit, and resignation to what is. But somewhere deep down, the understanding matures that you deserve more. This knowledge breaks through the layers of disappointment when you notice how the joy fades in your eyes, how the smile appears less often on your face, how it becomes increasingly difficult to recognize yourself in this relationship, as if you are looking into a distorting mirror. And the most bitter thing in this situation is his blindness. It is not that he cannot see your pain, rather he does not want to. After all, Acknowledging your suffering will require responsibility from him, and there are men who prefer the cozy swamp of comfort to the ascent to personal growth. They are more likely to accuse you of being overly demanding than to admit their own stinginess in expressing feelings. It is easier for them to call you complicated than to acknowledge their lack of tools or desire to match your emotional world. It is at this moment that it is time to make a choice in favor of yourself. Yes, it will be painful. Perhaps your heart will be broken into pieces, and it will seem that you have no strength left. But the alternative is to continue losing yourself, and that loss has already gone too far. You have given too much, waited too long for changes that never came. And it is not that changes are impossible, but that he does not want to change. No matter how hard you try to hide it, it is his conscious choice. A choice that leaves you alone in the middle of a relationship where you should have felt loved and protected. This choice makes you doubt whether you really deserve such treatment, whether you are ready to put up with such love. And the answer, despite all its pain, begins to take root within you. It is not an angry outburst, but a crystal-clear realization that burns with its truth. Seeing things as they are, without embellishment, without romantic illusions and self-deception, is excruciating, but at the same time, liberating. When you allow yourself to see what you have been trying so hard not to notice, your own voice returns to you. And this voice, your true voice, begins to speak the truth that you have been hiding under the rug of hope. It reminds you that you are not crazy, not demanding, and not complicated. You are valuable, and you have always known it. You have simply forgotten to act in accordance with that knowledge. In this unhurried process of self-restoration, there is no room for stormy ovations and bright fireworks, only all-consuming silence, strikingly different from the silence he gave you. And this silence does not cause pain. On the contrary, it gently embraces you, belonging entirely to you. This is a personal space where you can finally listen to yourself, without being distracted by external noise, without being afraid of causing inconvenience, and without constantly needing to justify your delicate mental organization. It is here, in this secluded corner, to which no one else has access, that you begin to remember what you were like, before you began to adjust and adapt in order to fit into a relationship that had become too cramped for you. After all, sometimes the problem is not that someone intentionally causes you pain. Sometimes the harm is more insidious and imperceptible. Sometimes emptiness is not the result of blows inflicted, but the result of a complete lack of emotional intimacy in a relationship. You spend days together, but your essences remain distant from each other. You have conversations, but they do not develop into a real dialogue. You sleep in the same bed, but you feel like your emotions have no place in his world. And you start to shrink, not because of a lack of self-love, but because of an excess of love for someone who is unable to accept it. And this realization doesn't come immediately. You notice it when you get tired of supporting the energy for two, when you realize that relationships can only develop when both partners invest their souls in them. When you realize that being with someone who doesn't work on themselves is like building a house on unstable ground. It is doomed to flooding. And no matter how much effort you put in, there will always be gaps. There will always be a chill seeping through invisible cracks. There will always be a sense of instability that never leaves you. But sometimes we prefer this instability to loneliness, because we have been taught since childhood that value lies in being chosen, even by someone who doesn't realize their happiness. Because we grew up watching women who remained silent in order to preserve love, who stayed out of fear, habit, or a sense of duty. And we learned that love is patience, compromise, adaptation, apologizing for being too emotional, asking for forgiveness for needing sincere participation. But everything comes to an end, because something inside you starts to scream, not with rage, but with an awareness of the truth. It starts to scream that you came into this world not to beg for alms, that you were not created for half-hearted love, that your tenderness is not a weakness, that your need for deep feelings is not an exaggeration, that your ability to see the essence of things is not a flaw, but a valuable gift. But this gift can only be revealed with those who dare to see you as you really are, who are not afraid of your emotions, who do not run away when you open your emotional wounds, who do not try to stifle you when you shine. And he's not one of them, never has been. And it hurts you to admit it, because your heart clings to dreams, even when reality refutes them time and time again, because you saw in him something that perhaps even he himself does not see. However, it is important to understand that the ability to see potential in a person does not mean that they aspire to the heights that you predict for them. Your mission is not to forcibly push someone to greatness, but to share the path of life with someone who has already made their choice and is confidently walking along it. You shouldn't take on the role of a tractor, porter, or lantern illuminating the darkness for someone who prefers twilight. Yes, perhaps this person has the best intentions. They may talk about love and even sincerely believe in their words. But love is something more than just words. Love is manifested in actions, in moments of shared silence, in glances full of support, in the daily decision to be together, grow together, and care for each other. If this is not the case, then everything else is just tinsel, camouflage, a game of ostentatious well-being, which may deceive others, but not your soul, because it always knows the truth. It's just that you, succumbing to fear, desire, or tenderness, chose to remain silent. But this silence is no longer necessary. Every time you choose him, you diminish yourself. Every excuse becomes a betrayal of your own interests. By agreeing to the minimum, you are giving up the maximum that you deserve, not out of arrogance, but out of a sense of self-worth, from the truth that lives inside and demands recognition. You are not a complicated woman, not a woman who demands too much. You are a conscious, awakened, and deep person, and this is not for everyone. Not everyone is ready for such depth. Your task is not to wait for someone to mature. Do not stay where your soul withers out of habit, fear, or pity. Do not waste your days on a presence that is not involved in your life. Time is relentless, and with it, your light fades if you don't take care of it. You came into this world not to extinguish your light, but to shine, feel, and expand horizons. This is only possible when you share your life with someone who is also brave enough to be authentic, who chooses themselves, who is not afraid of doubts and is open to discomfort. This is not someone who hides behind passivity, behind excuses like, "I am who I am," or "I love you, but..." It's not about hating this person, but about ceasing to idealize them, ceasing to expect that they will ever see what you see. Accept that there are people who simply do not strive for more, and this is their choice, a choice that you cannot change and for which you do not need to pay. By staying with someone who does not choose themselves, you betray yourself, disconnect from your intuition, and extinguish your strength. Nothing in the world is worth as much as your own light, a light that has been forged over years of learning, mistakes, tears known only to you, and difficult inner processes. Our inner light is not a torch burning in a vacuum. It needs recognition and response. Every time we stay close to those who refuse to see the light within us, we diminish its value, betray it. Yet this light is our essence, the source of our life energy, the foundation of our love, and everything that makes us who we are. We deserve a love that not only tolerates our light, but admires it. A love that may not be perfect or fairy tale-like, but is genuine, courageous, and real. True love is not afraid of our dark sides, does not turn away from tears, and is not intimidated by vulnerability. It looks directly into our eyes, listens without interrupting, and supports without stifling. It's a love that speaks not with words, but with actions. I am here, by your side. It doesn't need our help to be saved. It has already walked its path of self-discovery and does not seek to fill our lives but to share them with us. And when this understanding dawns, there is no turning back. Not because it is easy and painless, but because the soul cannot tolerate lies. Once we see what we truly deserve, we can no longer settle for what destroys us. It's impossible to wait for crumbs when we are born for emotional abundance. This is where the real journey begins, a journey not to others, but to ourselves. When scattered pieces of the mosaic begin to form a unified picture, when what once seemed unclear takes on sharp outlines, a new feeling is born within us. This is not a sudden epiphany, but a profound realization that we can no longer afford to waste energy on what does not nourish us. We can no longer continue to water a withering plant, even if it hurts to cut its roots. This painful cut liberates us, making room for something new, true, and in accordance with our essence. Something that doesn't have to be perfect, but must be real. Truth penetrates deep into your consciousness gradually, almost imperceptibly. It doesn't come crashing down in a storm, doesn't call out with insistent appeals, but whispers quietly in moments of solitude, at dawn, when you are alone with your thoughts. It reminds you that despite your previous courage and love, you must also be brave in letting go of the past. Not every love is destined to last forever to be meaningful, and some relationships simply complete their life cycle not due to a lack of feelings, but due to a lack of space for further joint development. And this is not a sign of defeat, but rather evidence that you have learned to recognize the moment when it is necessary to move forward, even if the path to this realization was long and thorny. There is certainly sadness in liberation, and you should not close your eyes to reality or hope for the instantaneous disappearance of pain. Pain arises with the acceptance of what you already knew subconsciously, with the recognition of what you were afraid to admit. And this pain cannot be rationalized or diminished. It is a pain born from saying goodbye to idealized notions, to what you hoped to change by investing enough time, love, and patience. However, time, love, and patience cannot change what does not want to change. And this lesson, however difficult it may be, can only be learned by the soul through personal experience. At first, the world seems quieter. It's not that love has suddenly disappeared, and it's not that the emptiness is easily filled, but something inside you begins to recover, like a flower that languishes in the shade, but blooms in the sunlight. And this sun, although it may seem distant at first, is inside you. The light that you thought had left you is still there, waiting to be noticed again, waiting for you to look at it with open eyes. Perhaps this light will be dim at first, but over time it will become brighter, because every time you refuse to return to what made you lose yourself, this light intensifies. Every time you choose yourself, this light shines a little brighter. Although the road to healing can be thorny and long, it is of a highly intimate nature. This process does not require publicity unless you wish it, because the truth you are learning belongs solely to you. No one can walk this path for you. No one can fully grasp the depth of your experiences and the scale of the acquired experience. And this is perfectly normal. There is no need for anyone's approval. You don't need someone else to understand the course of your thoughts. The main thing is to be involved in this process, to be aware of every step you take, every moment when you realize that you are no longer the same as before. And this is natural, because every lesson, no matter how bitter it may be, has left its mark, making you stronger, wiser, and closer to yourself. Perhaps it seems to you that the love you gave did not return to the extent that you expected. However, the love that you ultimately gave yourself is of paramount importance. This love is not associated with sacrifices or inflated expectations. This love only wants the best for you, even when everything else is falling apart. This love supports you when you feel lost, embraces you when you are broken, and restores your hope when you have reached rock bottom. And this love, the most sincere and genuine, ultimately leads you to realize that you deserve only the best, that you do not deserve a love that makes you settle for mediocrity, that constantly makes you doubt yourself and makes you feel not good enough. It is about the very love that treats you with deep respect, accepts you with all your virtues and flaws, and sees your uniqueness and versatility. You deserve a love that will be the impetus for your development, a source of vitality and inspiration on the path to self-improvement. And when this love knocks on your door, when you realize that the main thing is not to be the object of someone's love, but to be able to love yourself completely, everything around you will be transformed. Your relationship with yourself will become richer, deeper, and more sincere, and this will become the foundation for everything else in your life. After all, only by loving and knowing yourself can you attract into your life what is truly meant for you. Until this love for yourself becomes unwavering, continue your journey, question everything that does not benefit you, learn from every moment you experience, and most importantly, stay true to yourself. There is nothing more valuable than the truth that lives in your heart. It is she who will be your compass, even in the darkest times, will show the way to the light that has always been there, waiting to be discovered.